Thanks, Pat. So I'm going to give you an introduction today to the National Ecosystems Monitoring Network. I'm just going to give you a quick run through what it is, where it comes from, what we do, and then go and look at the impact of, at how we look at the impact of air quality on our ecosystems. So first up, Ireland's National Ecosystems Monitoring Network. What is it? Where did it come from? So it was a legislative requirement as set out in the 2016 revision of the National Emissions Reductions Commitment Directive. It was identified that there was a European-wide gap in knowledge and that there was no formal network across member states to assess the effects of air pollutant on sensitive ecosystems. So the revised directive required the establishment of these national networks in order to help us to measure, track and assess the impacts of air pollution on natural and semi-natural habitats. So the Article 9 of the directive requires us to develop the national networks, and then Article 10 requires us to report on the air pollution pressures and impacts on our semi-natural and natural habitats, including forests, freshwater and terrestrial ecosystems, such as bogs and grasslands. There's reductions commitments set in Annex 2 of the NEC directive for a wide variety of parameters, including sulphur dioxide, non-methane VOCs, nitrogen oxides, PM2.5. But we're taking a stepped approach, and in Ireland, the pollutants of main concern for impacts on ecosystems are ammonia and nitrogen deposition. So in this iteration of the network, they are the pollutants that we are looking for. There's a 4-yearly reporting cycle, and we submitted data to the Commission in the summer of 2023. It's an indefinite network, so it's a network that will be established. It's been established for long-term monitoring, and we coordinate. We will link with other national authorities for carrying out monitoring. So yes, it's a network that it's facilitated by the EPA. So the purpose of the network then is to provide robust data on the impacts of air quality on sensitive ecosystems, and to provide evidence to inform the EPA position on atmospheric nitrogen and ammonia emissions and their impacts on sensitive ecosystems. So that's the overall purpose of the National Ecosystems Monitoring Network. So who's involved in this? Because it's quite a big job of work. So it's a national network, it's facilitated by the EPA, but it's a collaborative network, and we have a huge amount of stakeholders involved. You can see there, we have we get expert advice, our expert knowledge and support from our UK Centre of Ecology and Hydrology, along with UCD. We have National Parks and Wildlife Service are a huge stakeholder in relation to the work that we're doing in carrying out ecological surveys, soil and moss collection, providing us with expert advice and providing us with local support at our National Ecosystems Monitoring Network sites. We have the Department of Environment as well, providing us with expert advice and guidance, and the Department of Ag carrying out forest surveys, and carrying out soil and moss collection. We also have NEMN, which will carry out rainfall analysis for us, and they actually provide local support at some of our National Ecosystem Monitoring Network sites. Within the EPA then as well, we have the water programme is one of our stakeholders. They provide information on freshwater sites. We have our internal EPA laboratories who carry out the analysis of our ammonia tubes and will be carrying out rainfall analysis for us. And they provide local support at sites as well. And then we have the EPA research project, our research unit, providing funding for relevant projects. So how is the NEMN set up? So essentially, there are 2 types of monitoring sites in the NEMN. We have level 1 sites and level 2 sites. Our level 1 sites are non-invasive periodic ecological surveys. So these monitor the long-term air pollutant impacts through surveys on vegetation ecology of the site, and we carry out soil and moss collection for analysis there as well. These sites are visited periodically, so these tie in with when National Parks and Wildlife are out doing their Article 17 monitoring under the Habitats Directive. These sites, I'll go in more into the sites in a minute, but because these sites are visited infrequently, we actually have a wide spread of these sites across the country, across the various different habitat types. the bogland or raised bog, blanket bog, Millennium Meadows and calcareous grassland. They're our terrestrial sites. And then we have our level 2 sites as well. So these are our instrumented sites. These are for atmospheric monitoring of air pollutants. These sites have equipment installed for monthly passive monitoring, atmospheric monitoring for ammonia, NO2, and we will have wet deposition monitoring set up as well at these sites. In general, the level 1 and the level 2 sites are co-located, so and there's not as many level 2 sites as there is level 1 site, but any of our level 2 sites will be co-located in general with a level 1 site. So these are level 1 sites, these are our terrestrial ecosystems, and this is where we carry out our ecological monitoring. So there's monitoring, as I mentioned, already carried out by the National Parks and Wildlife Service under Article 17 of the Habitats Directive through raised bog schemes or grassland monitoring schemes. So what we've done is we have selected a range of sites along a nitrogen deposition gradient, and these sites have been incorporated into our NEMN. So we have sites selected along the nitrogen deposition gradient along various different, including all the different habitat types, and with a spread across the country to make it as representative as possible. And on the sites that have been incorporated into NEMN, we've established permanent quadrats. At the permanent quadrats, then floristic surveys are carried out to determine species cover, and there's soil and moss samples collected, and these are sent for geochemical analysis. We have so the ecological surveys then look at plant species and the communities, and they're a great guide because I said this is going to be kind of an indefinite long-term monitoring network. So when these ecological surveys, they'll act as a great guide to see if there's any changes in the species over time. We also have level 1 monitoring carried out at forest sites. So the Forest Service in the Department of Ag they're already carrying out monitoring under the National Forest Inventory and under the ICP Forest Programme. And we have incorporated 37 of the forest sites into our network, and these are served by DAFN when they're out, and then they carry out soil and moss collection at 6 of these sites every year. So our reporting cycle is every 4 years, so over the kind of reporting cycles we get a lot of those soils, because it's kind of cumbersome when the Department of Ag are out doing their work already under the programmes to have to collect the soil and moss, so we don't get them to do every one each year. This is just a map to give you an idea of the spread of our sites across the country, and a breakdown, it's probably hard to see, and a breakdown of the different the ecosystems types. So you've grasslands and raised bogs, heathlands and blanket bogs, and woodlands and forests. So these are our level 1 sites, so you can see there's a good spread across the country. We also have 20 freshwater level 1 sites. So these are like upland lakes, like really upland, in that there should be no upstream sources of pollution to these freshwaters. The only pollution that should be getting into them is kind of from an atmospheric point of view. And then we have our level 2 monitoring. So our level 2 sites are where we carry out our atmospheric monitoring, as I said. We have the sites are set up. It's really not high tech at all. It's a stake in the ground with an upside down plant pot, but it does the job. So there you can see these 3 tubes there on the top. They're alpha tubes. They're passive ammonia monitors. And then on the side then we have NOx monitors as well. So on the sites then, these are visited monthly. There's the monthly changes of the alpha samplers and the NOx tubes. And we will have wet deposition set up on these sites. They'll be collected every 2 weeks. We have the plan in this iteration of the network is that we should have about 18 sites set up to a level 2. And then we currently have 12 set up at a level 2, with 1 more to be set up before the end of the year. The idea is that, like as I said, they're going to be co-located with the level 1 sites. So if over time, when we're looking at the level 1 sites and we see that there is a species change or there's something going on through the surveys that are carried out there, that we can look at the ammonia, our atmospheric results, and see if there's a correlation between what we're seeing. So this is just an idea to give you a spread of our level 2 sites at the moment. We have, you can see that there's a spread around the country. The green ones are the ones that we have set up, and then the grey ones are the ones that we have planned to have set up by the end of 2027. So that's this kind of iteration of the network. You can see that we have a spread of raised bogs, forests, grasslands, blanket bogs, heathlands, and you can see as well that we have sites set up, the smaller kind of bracket at the end, we have sites set up along that nitrogen deposition gradient from high, medium and low impact areas. So this is just, so as I had mentioned, we have ammonia concentrations and nitrogen deposition are the main focus of Ireland's NEMN. So nitrogen deposition is the most important driver when it comes to ecosystems impacts from atmospheric pollution in Ireland. Ammonia is a highly reactive soluble alkaline gas, with the main source coming from agriculture. So in the atmosphere, the ammonia reacts with acid pollutants such as sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides to produce a reactive ammonia. And then nitrogen deposition then just describes the input of that reactive nitrogen from the atmosphere into the biosphere through gaseous forms in dry deposition and through precipitation as wet deposition. So how do we assess the risk of the air pollution then, the impact on the ecosystems? So critical levels of critical loads are tools for assessing the risk of air pollution on impacts on it to sensitive ecosystems. So a critical level is a concentration of ammonia in the air above which negative ecological effects are likely to occur. And a critical load is the amount of nitrogen deposited above which a negative ecological effect is likely to occur. So critical level is about the ammonia concentrations in the air, and the critical load then is about the nitrogen deposited on the land. So every habitat, or each habitat and species, will have their own specific critical level or critical load. So if you're seeing levels of ammonia concentration or nitrogen deposition above those levels, that's where you're likely to see your ecological impacts. So some of the ecological impacts then that we're seeing then are like direct toxicity through foliar root or xylem damage. We have eutrophication through unwanted nutrients entering the system, acidification through the nitrification of soil, basification then as well, and then just in general the exacerbation of other stresses from drought and frost and ozone damage. All of these essentially can lead to communities or species community changes. The picture at the top is an area where there is an impact from ammonia concentrations. You can kind of see the slimy kind of algal growth on the trees, and then the bottom picture, that's a picture of good air quality with lichens growing on the tree surface. As I mentioned previously, we did submit data in 2023 to the Commission as a requirement under the NEC directive, and since we've submitted that data, we've been carrying out a data analysis project. This is a network that's really only in its infancy, so we don't have a huge amount of information, and it's kind of nearly too early, because it is a long-term monitoring network, it's nearly too early to kind of draw much conclusions from it. But I suppose we have seen, but it's hard to say even at the moment what we're seeing, if that's something that we'll continue to see. But say one thing, for example, that we've seen is in bogs that have higher modelled ammonia concentrations, we have seen that the nitrogen content in the moss kind of correlates with that. But I suppose two of the things that that we can tell from what the work we're doing so far is that there is a value in establishing a long-term network to monitor the air pollution impact, the long-term air pollution impacts on ecosystems within Ireland, and the monitoring and the information that we're going to get out from the network, it'll provide valuable information then to inform the EPA position on the impacts of ammonia and nitrogen as well. So that's it. Oh, on the button.